A very warm welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining me once again in my terrifying library. Every week, provided everything goes according to plan, I bring you the most astonishing and chilling mysteries from history right here on this channel. I know, the title of this video sounds unbelievable, almost made up, but it's absolutely real. A woman reported that Batman attacked her on New Year's Eve, and what followed became a case that has since inspired films, documentaries, and countless interviews. And the most shocking part, it happened not long ago, on January 1st, 2021. If you find this video intriguing and want to show your support, go ahead and give it a like, and drop a comment below, 1, 2, or as many as you'd like. Those small gestures truly make a big difference for the channel. Now, without further delay, if you're ready to find out what happened with Batman in this bizarre case, you know what to do. Turn off all the lights, lock every door, and get comfortable, because your next nightmare begins now. It all began in the early hours of January 1st, 2021, in an apartment in Canton, Georgia. Rodne Metzer was spending his first New Year's Eve as a divorcee, without his children, without his wife Morgan. It was a quiet, uneventful evening. He made dinner, watched a movie, and tried calling his parents, but the lines were overwhelming. Eventually, he went to the bathroom to brush his teeth. That's when it happened. A stranger knocked on the window. He couldn't see their face, only a shadow. The voice that followed was distorted and unintelligible, but in the midst of the murmuring, he clearly recognized one word: Morgan. His ex-wife's name. A chill ran down his spine. Panicked, he grabbed his phone and tried calling her, fearing something terrible had happened. But again, the lines were down. Without hesitating, he threw on his jacket and rushed to his car. He drove to her house. Surveillance footage captured everything: Rodne pounding on the door, ringing the bell, shouting her name. The cameras even showed him walking away from the front porch, still calling out for her, and then heading toward the back. As I mentioned earlier, everything was caught on camera, except what happened on the back porch. That area had no surveillance. What we do know is that Rodne climbed the stairs in the dark and found his ex-wife lying on the ground, half naked, her hands bound and a pillowcase over her head. Morgan was covered in injuries, bloodied, terrified, almost frozen. She couldn't speak, couldn't stammer, couldn't even make a sound. Rodne helped her to her feet and brought her inside. He asked what had happened, why she was in that state, and who had done this to her. All Morgan could say was that Batman had attacked her. She was so distraught that she couldn't explain anything further. So Rodne took control of the situation. Police officers arrived at the scene around 3:00 a.m. and immediately sprang into action. Rodne was kept outside on the front porch while Morgan was brought inside, given clothes, a glass of water, and a chance to breathe. Once she had calmed down, Morgan finally began to speak, and the story she told was, frankly, surreal. That New Year's Eve, her 8-year-old twin children were in Florida, staying with a friend of hers along with other kids. They had been there for several days and were due to return soon. That night, Morgan went to spend the evening with her best friend, Nicole Stavashevsky. The plan was simple: dinner and a quiet celebration. But after eating, Morgan was physically and mentally drained, so she said goodbye and went home. Her phone had been off for most of the day, but when she turned it on, she saw a message from Rodne. He told her he had left a check for her on the front porch. Already in her pajamas, she stepped outside, picked it up, and went back in. She turned off the lights, set the alarm, got into bed, and tried to sleep. But the fireworks outside made it difficult. People nearby were celebrating loudly. Oddly, her dog, a pug, didn't react. Fireworks didn't bother him, but there were only two things that could make him bark: visitors and unfamiliar noises. That night he was calm, relaxed beside her, and that gave her a false sense of security. But at some point the dog did bark. Morgan opened her eyes and saw a man standing at the foot of her bed. He was dressed entirely in black. A dark mask, hoodie, pants, and black gloves. He carried something that looked like a weapon, possibly a gun, and his voice was distorted, as if he were using a voice modulator. He spoke with a deep, menacing tone, exactly like Batman. He immediately began issuing commands. Standing stiff like a soldier, fists clenched, ready to strike, he lunged at her and tackled her onto the bed. That's when he began to beat her, using the weapon as a blunt object. What happened next was sheer chaos. He jumped on top of her, restrained her, used zip ties as makeshift handcuffs, and struck her in the face with the butt of a pistol. Then he strangled her twice until she lost consciousness. When she awoke, he sexually assaulted her in an utterly brutal manner. He threatened to kill her. He explicitly told her he would, that he was going to murder her, and then go after her entire family. He demanded to know where she kept her jewelry and cash, and paralyzed by fear, Morgan told him. He ransacked the house, tearing everything apart. Then he returned to her, continuing the threats. He told her he wouldn't stop until her entire family was dead. What's going to happen to my children? What about our will? I never spoke to my family about who would take care of them. She later recalled thinking, they're not going to have a mother. It's the worst feeling in the world, to believe you're about to die, and that before it happens you'll be tortured. At one point, the attacker said something about how much she must miss her husband. On instinct, Morgan begged him not to hurt Rodne, saying that deep down she still cared about him. That's when the man demanded her phone to disable the home alarm system. She gave it to him. He asked for the passcode. She gave him that too. He disabled the alarm and kept the phone. Then he lifted her into his arms, carried her down the stairs and left her on the back porch. He placed a pillowcase over her head and gave strict instructions. Don't scream, don't run, don't call for help. Stay right here until you hear a car horn honk twice, only then can you run. She obeyed. She remained motionless, but when she finally heard the honking, she didn't move. She was convinced it was a test, that if she ran, they would kill her. So she stayed there for what she thought was 15 minutes, but in reality it was 40, frozen in place, unable to move, paralyzed by fear. In the dead silence, she finally heard footsteps approaching, and then Rodne's voice. What happened? Sergeant Dakota Liverbers had many questions, given his experience and the nature of the attack. He immediately suspected that the perpetrator was someone close to Morgan, someone who knew she would be alone that night. For him, the most likely suspect was Rodne, her ex-husband. How did he know she'd be home alone? How did he know she would be there that night? Who had sent him that message? Why did he know it was a warning? And most puzzling of all, why weren't the children with their parents that night? Why were they in Florida, so far away? Since Rodne had been present at the scene and was also a key witness, the couple was separated for questioning. Morgan was interviewed inside the house, while Rodne was kept at the main gate, far from her. From there, investigators began to dig into their past. Morgan and Rodne had been together for most of their lives. In fact, they had been a couple for 20 years. They met when she was just 14 and he was 17. From that moment on, they were inseparable. Their love story was idyllic. They met in school, and it was love at first sight. In 2009, they got married. Everyone believed they were the perfect couple. Soulmates, destined to be together. But just 6 months later, tragedy struck. Rodne's brother Kevin passed away from leukemia, and Morgan became his primary source of emotional support. From that moment on, Rodne depended on her completely, and this dynamic never changed. In any healthy relationship, when one partner is suffering, the other offers comfort, a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on. But in their case, it became a one-way street. From then forward, Rodne always had to be consoled, and Morgan's emotions were relegated to the background. It was as if she had no right to grieve, as though her pain wasn't valid, not important, as if Rodne's suffering always outweighed hers. He was always the one hurting more. He was always the center of everything. A striking example of this imbalance came the following year, when Morgan discovered she was pregnant. The couple was expecting a baby boy, and overjoyed, they shared the news with everyone. They were thrilled, ecstatic. The child would be named Kevin William Metzer in honor of Rodne's late brother, a touching tribute that filled the entire family with happiness. Sadly, the baby was born with a congenital heart defect and passed away just 18 days after birth. Once again, Rodne was shattered. And once again, Morgan was expected to push aside her grief and hold him together. She had to recover quickly, find her strength and support him, because, as always, his pain was deemed greater than hers. 3 months later, Morgan became pregnant again, this time with twins. Thankfully, everything went well. She gave birth in 2012, and from that point on, things finally seemed to turn around. They were happy, a close-knit family. Their life appeared picture perfect. But in 2013, misfortune returned. Rodne lost his job. Financially, they weren't in trouble. They had savings. Morgan had a stable full-time position, and Rodne could look for another job. Nothing seemed alarming on the surface. But while things were steady, Morgan's personal and professional life was thriving, perhaps a little too much for Rodne's comfort. Not only did she have a secure job, but she had also started a side business, an interior design company called Shiplap and Sugar. At first, it was just a hobby, an occasional project with a few clients, a little extra income. But soon, that small side gig exploded into something far bigger. It became extremely profitable. She eventually left her previous job to focus on her business full-time, and her success skyrocketed. Things went so well that she even hired her best friend Nicole, who also worked in design. Together, they built an empire. They were thriving financially and professionally, and business was booming. Rodne, on the other hand, was not. He wasn't achieving anything. He wasn't making money. and living in her shadow was becoming unbearable. It infuriated him. That was when he slowly began to manipulate her, to make her feel like she was nothing without him. He made her believe she was a bad mother, a bad wife, a selfish person. If she worked too much, he criticized her for neglecting her family. If she worked too little, he accused her of lacking ambition. If she spent time with him, he said she was emotionally distant. If they were apart, he said she was avoiding him. Everything became a source of tension, constant arguments, escalating pressure, relentless conflict. And then one day, everything changed. They went on a trip with some friends. On the surface, everything appeared fine, at least until they were alone. That's when he confronted her. They argued, and in the heat of the moment, he grabbed her wrists and shook her. He physically assaulted her. Morgan didn't say a word. She left the trip, returned home, and told her parents everything, what had happened and what Rodne had been doing to her. But when her father went to confront Rodne, he turned the situation around. He claimed that Morgan was intense, overly dramatic, hysterical, always playing the victim. He said she had lost her temper that day, disrespected him, and that he had merely held her wrist to calm her down. Rodne presented himself as the calm, kind, sincere good guy, and incredibly, people believed him. Morgan, in contrast, was dismissed as unstable, irrational. Whatever she said from that point forward was seen as an exaggeration, a distortion, or a lie. Seeing that the narrative was now on his side, Rodne pressed forward, and what followed became increasingly cruel and twisted. In private, he gaslighted her, emotionally manipulating and mistreating her. Whenever she confronted him, he deflected blame with comments like, "I never said that. You're imagining things, you're exaggerating. That's not what happened." In front of their children, he lied openly to play the victim. If he tripped, he claimed she pushed him. If he fell, he said it was her fault. And all of this happened in front of their two young children, just 8 years old. It was relentless. Morgan began to doubt her own sanity. She questioned whether she was imagining everything, whether she was the problem, whether none of it was real, but it was real. And it only got worse. Rodne eventually crossed another line and began to physically assault her. The first incidents happened during intimate moments. Things started out consensual, but at a certain point he would become aggressive. She would ask him to stop, beg him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. Afterward, when she confronted him, he accused her of lying. He told her she had wanted it, that she had agreed to it, that it was all in her head. In early 2020, they had what would become their final argument. That night, Rodne became violent, truly violent, and Morgan reached her breaking point. She contacted an attorney and filed for divorce. Throughout the rest of that year, Rodne tried to win her back, to convince her to return, to regain control. Forgiveness was no longer an option. Morgan had reached her limit. She was done with the abuse, the lies, the manipulation. There was no turning back, and she was ready to see it through to the very end. The divorce was finalized in December. She kept the house and was granted full custody of the children, while Rodne moved into an apartment about 12 minutes away by car. Up to that point, everything seemed civil. There were no further threats, no more confrontations. Things appeared to be stable. Rodne seemed calm, even accepting, as if he finally understood it was truly over. For the sake of the children, they managed to maintain a cordial relationship. Or so it seemed. But during the last week of December, Rodne called Morgan and confessed something shocking. He told her he had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She was stunned. He claimed he hadn't told anyone, not his parents, not his brother, not a single soul. Only Morgan knew. He showed her medical bills, treatment plans, emails from doctors, every piece of evidence. He cried as he told her, and he appeared utterly broken. Morgan didn't want the children to see their father in that condition. So she made a decision. She called a friend in Florida who had young kids and asked if she could take the twins for a few days. The friend agreed, and Rodne stayed at Morgan's house for a week. During that time, they spoke often. She comforted him, supported him, as she always had. But as the days went on, something began to feel off. Yes, he appeared sad and defeated, but at the same time, he told her he now had a job and was earning a significant income. He said he could take care of her and the children. All she had to do, he insisted, was shut down her business, stay home, and let him support her. He said that once he recovered, they could be a family again. Then came December 31st. Early that morning, Morgan had had enough. She confronted Rodne directly. She demanded that he tell his parents the truth, that he call his mother and disclose his diagnosis. She insisted that his mother be the one to care for him, accompany him to doctor's appointments, and take responsibility for his well-being. Morgan told him to face reality. They were divorced and there was no future between them. She was firm. She no longer loved him. She no longer wanted to be with him. She asked him politely but firmly, to leave her home immediately, but Rodne wouldn't back down. He said he would leave, just not yet. He insisted they spend New Year's Eve together. Morgan refused outright. She told him she wouldn't be home that night, that she was going to stay with her parents, far away, and that he was not welcome. Still, for the rest of the day, throughout the day, Rodne wouldn't stop calling her, exhausted and overwhelmed. Morgan eventually turned off her phone, unaware that later that very night Rodne would end up saving her. But to the police, something about the entire situation didn't add up. The story was riddled with inconsistencies. It simply made no sense. There were people with Morgan inside the house that night, and there were people with Rodne outside, on the main porch. The officers were split between both two locations. But as Morgan recounted the events of that night, it became increasingly clear that the story's loose ends all pointed to one person, Rodne. The first clue was the dog. Morgan owned a pug, a breed not known for aggression but loyal nonetheless. That dog only barked for two reasons: unfamiliar noises and visitors. It barked when the masked intruder first appeared, the man dressed in black. But during the actual attack, it did nothing. No barking, no growling. It was as if the dog recognized what was happening, as if it had witnessed similar violence before and knew this was not unfamiliar. That strongly suggested that the attacker was not a stranger, at least not to the dog. And as Morgan had previously stated, Rodne had assaulted her in the past. Second, there was the alarm system. Morgan had gone to bed with the home's security system fully activated, yet the intruder entered the house without triggering any sensors. That meant he knew exactly where and how to enter the home without setting off an alert. Rodne had spent the previous week in that very house. He had more than enough time to scope out vulnerabilities, and when investigators conducted a full inspection, they discovered something revealing. The sensor on the basement window had been tampered with. It wasn't on the glass where it should have been. It wasn't even on the window frame. Instead, it had been repositioned, low against the wall, in such a way that opening the window wouldn't trip the alarm. Only someone with knowledge of the alarm system and access to the home could have discovered that. Only Rodne. Then came Morgan's own perception of the attack. At first, it was violent and overwhelming. The man barged in, pinned her down, beat her, tied her up, and assaulted and threatened her. But there was a moment when everything changed. A moment when the attack abruptly lost intensity. It was when the intruder said, "You must miss your husband," and Morgan replied instinctively, "Please don't hurt Rodne. I still love him." She later confessed she didn't know what made her say it, but in that moment she felt something shift. The tension in the room changed. She suddenly knew she was going to survive. After that, the man asked for her phone, requested the passcode, and disarmed the alarm system. Then, with deliberate gentleness, he picked her up in his arms, carried her downstairs, and placed her carefully on the back porch. And that gesture, the way he held her, was exactly how Rodne used to hold her when they were still together. The way he held her, especially while she was pregnant, was unmistakably familiar. The attacker's grip, the way he lifted her, felt eerily intimate. In Morgan's mind, the man wasn't a stranger. It was Rodne. And then there was the matter of the alarm system. The intruder had deactivated it effortlessly, as if he were fully familiar with Morgan's phone. He navigated the app with ease, as though he had used it countless times before. That made sense. Rodne was the one who had originally installed the system. He knew exactly how it worked. With this mounting evidence, the police decided to question Rodne further. They kept him outside, speaking to him calmly. He appeared composed, almost too composed. His tone was measured, his expressions controlled. He hardly blinked. Then an officer asked him for his phone. Without hesitation, Rodne handed it over. The officer took the device to the patrol car for a preliminary review. It was an iPhone, and the officer knew how to search for hidden folders. He found one. What was inside was shocking. There were screenshots of Morgan's private messages, recordings pulled directly from her phone, clips he had taken himself. Conversations between Morgan and another man, casual flirtation, seemingly innocent exchanges, and dozens of photos, images taken without her knowledge. Photos of her sleeping, half-dressed, coming out of the shower, distracted, images taken secretly, over a long period of time. Months, possibly even a year, and some taken just within the past week. These were not ordinary photos. These were the disturbing works of a stalker. What Rodne had done constituted a serious breach of privacy and a criminal offense. He was arrested on the spot. At the station, investigators began the formal interrogation while simultaneously requesting search warrants for his vehicle and apartment. What they discovered next was far worse. In his apartment, they found plastic zip ties, the same kind used to restrain Morgan. But what truly stood out was the specific configuration. The attacker had fashioned makeshift handcuffs using several zip ties. One end had a peculiar triple head-locking mechanism that served no practical purpose. Police searched Rodne's belongings and found the exact missing parts in his home. The plastic cuts matched perfectly. It was undeniable. Emboldened by this evidence, detectives expanded their search. On his laptop and phone, they uncovered deeply disturbing search queries. How to unlock a phone without the passcode. How to strangle someone until they pass out. How to alter your voice so you're not recognized. And among his files were fake documents forged by Rodne himself. The pancreatic cancer diagnosis was a lie. Rodne had never been ill. The emails purported to be from the doctor were fabricated. The medical bills also forged. There were already multiple red flags, including a book found in his possession titled 7 Ways to Be Her Hero, the hero your wife has been waiting for. Rodne was obsessed with Rodne Metzer for months. He had been meticulously orchestrating this entire scheme, planning to terrify her, push her to the brink, and then swoop in as her savior. But incredibly, when brought in for questioning, he denied everything. The investigators laid out the evidence: his phone, the photos, the recordings, the tampered alarm. And yet Rodne remained unmoved. He didn't flinch. He didn't look anxious. He showed no concern at all. He claimed Morgan was fabricating everything, that she was being dramatic, that she was a compulsive victim. He dismissed the mountain of evidence against him as nonsense, insisting that he only wanted to save her. When news of Rodne's arrest reached the public, his family was in disbelief. They couldn't accept it. To them, he was harmless, a good man who had always loved Morgan. They believed the police had the wrong person, that Rodne was being unfairly accused, even portrayed as a hero, but in court, his mask came off. Family and friends were forced to confront the truth. Rodne was not the man they thought he was. The recorded interrogations, the audio clips, the videos, even his body language, they all revealed a chilling lack of empathy. No remorse, no accountability, just cold indifference. The evidence was overwhelming. And then came the final piece that sealed the case: security footage from a local superstore. The crime had taken place during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, a time when masks were mandatory in public spaces. In the footage, taken 36 hours before the attack, Rodne can be seen at the checkout counter. He was not wearing a mask. He stood tall, unashamed, and paid for a package of black zip ties, the same kind used to restrain Morgan, using his debit card. The product code on the packaging matched precisely. And yet, even in the courtroom, Rodne did not react. He remained stone-faced, emotionless. Rodne Metzer was ultimately charged with 14 criminal counts related to the attack, including home invasion, possession of a weapon, firearm possession, armed robbery, assault by strangulation, theft, kidnapping, and aggravated battery. On August 4, 2021, after reaching a plea agreement, Rodne Metzer was sentenced to 25 years in prison. But now it's your turn. What's your opinion on this case? Do you believe the sentence was fair? And that brings us to the end of today's video. What did you think of this story? Honestly, when I first began researching the case, I thought, no, this can't be real. It doesn't make any sense to me. It seemed crystal clear from the start, but there were still aspects that didn't quite add up. If Rodne was the attacker, why did he rush to her house afterward? Why go to such lengths to erase his tracks? That said, I believe the outcome of this case was fair. In the end, the truth came out. This man had manipulated and abused Morgan for over 2 decades, and no one believed her. But ultimately, he was caught, and the evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, surveillance, audio files, it was all there, stacked against him. But as always, the final word is yours. Do you believe justice was served? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now I'll wrap things up for real. Down in the description, you'll find all the sources I used, direct links to my books, and of course, all my social media accounts. I'm on Facebook, Twitch, and Instagram, where I post updates, new content alerts, and lots more. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video. Ciao.